Apologize, I accidentally left out the chapter 12, 13, and 14 during my editing. Here they are. The first Gurazi came to me because of Angel. It was 2 months after the Moy family had come to marriage, and Uncle James was acting as if he had swallowed a snake. He was obviously troubled, but no one knew why. He strode up and down the paths of Banda Hill, talking angrily on his phone. Some said a local chief had complained that the graves in the diamond fields were being destroyed. Every Shona knew the importance of the revered ancestors they worshipped, and if a grave had been disturbed it was serious business. Others said it was Banda's razor wire that he had set up around the mine that had offended the Midzumi. No one had the right to fence off land, and everyone knew if the land spirits were angry, there would be no more diamonds. A few of the bolder adults whispered that Banda had become too greedy. Uncle James shouted into his cell phone, and then abruptly the conversation ended. He picked up a shovel and smashed it on the ground. Miners scattered as he moved through the pit, swinging his shovel like a punch-drunk boxer. Faster! Work faster! He shouted at a man working next to me who had left 3 sacks of untouched ore lying beside him. What are you doing on my mine? You're wasting time. Uncle James gripped the man by the arm and struck him across the face with the handle of the shovel, and then kicked one of the sacks. Get this man off my mine, he called to Musi. Patson, take his place. I ran over and tried to lift the unconscious man out of the water. Musi walked up and pushed me aside. Get out of the way, boy, he ordered as others from the security team ran down and hauled the man through the mine. Get back to work, screamed Uncle James at the diggers gawking at him. What are you looking at? We all quickly returned to our work. I scooped up the ore from the sack Banda had kicked, dumped it into my sieve, dipped it under the water, shook the basket, and lifted it onto the bank. I had done this too many times to count, but this time a Gurazi was sitting on top of the wet gravel, the size of my big toe. The trouble was controlling my breathing. A surge of excitement exploded in my chest. I tamped it down, aware that the slightest sign of acceleration would draw unwanted attention. I had to keep working in a slow, steady rhythm. I had to remain calm. I dipped the basket back into the swirling, caramel-colored water, glancing up to see if anyone was looking in my direction. All eyes were on Musi and the guards carrying the unconscious man out of Banda Hill. It was then that I noticed his shoes lying on the bank, and offered up thanks to my sheikh for bringing me both the Gurazi and a way of getting it off the mine. Without considering the danger, I placed the sieving basket next to the shoes, palmed the Gurazi, picked up the shoes, and followed the guards carrying the man. I figured it would take me about 3 minutes to walk to the entrance. There, I knew I would be searched. I had to work quickly, but at the same time everything had to be done without anyone noticing anything unusual. I paused to drink at the water station, buying myself more time. The guards had dumped the unconscious man a short distance away, just outside the mine entrance. Musi was having a heated discussion with his father. None of the miners dared to look up from their work. As the guards started walking back into Banda Hill, I ran toward the entrance, now guarded by only one man. I got his shoes, I said, waving them in the air. The guard who had been watching them drag the man across the field turned to search me. I lifted my arms up in the air, spread my legs, and opened my mouth. Boss man is crazy today, he said, worrily looking over my shoulder at Banda. He was shouting at Musi. If he's got problems, we've all got problems, I said as the man ran his hands over my body, checked under my tongue, glanced at the rag shoes I held in front of him, and then nodded for me to pass. I ran up to the man lying on the ground, praying that he would still be unconscious. As I approached, he stirred, flinging his arm to one side in an effort to stand. At any moment he might open his eyes and see what I was doing. I slipped my hand into the shoe where I had stuck the gauzy with chewing gum and pried it loose with my left hand. The man groaned and opened his eyes, and I knelt down beside him. "You were unlucky today," I said, handing him his shoes. "Pray to your ancestors that you will find what you want at Mafiko's Munda." We both knew he would not be returning to Banda Hill. The man blinked at me, took his shoes and staggered away. Walking back to the mine, I pretended I needed to have a pee. I turned around and trotted to the nearest set of boulders. With my back to anyone who might be watching, I carefully checked the size and shape of the nearest thorn tree, the relationship between the rock I was peeing against and where the sun set. I dropped the gauzy and surreptitiously scuffed as much sand as I dared over it. And then, just to be absolutely sure I would find it later, I made as if I was wiping my hand on my t-shirt, but instead I tore off a scrap and dropped it into a nearby bush. When I returned to my station, Arves, Camber, Jeremy, and Chipper all looked up, like a family of meerkats, and watched me pick up the sieving basket and start working again. "You good?" asked Chippo, walking over. "Just fine," I replied. "You took the guy his shoes?" asked Jamie. "Aha, why did you do that?" "'Cause maybe he felt sorry for him," Jamie chipped in. Arves. "Was he hurt badly?" Camber didn't really sound concerned. "He's okay. Sore head, that's all." I held the sack Banda had kicked, and poured more ore into my sieve. "You took him his shoes, 'cause you felt sorry for him?" Jamie again. "Nah, not really. I just took him his shoes." I didn't look at Jamie but felt his eyes on my back. "Hey, Jam, why's your father so pissed?" asked Arves. "He's making everyone jumpy." "Yeah, what's going on?" Chippo joined in. Jam glanced around to see who was within earshot. "He was shouting at Muzi," said Camber. "I thought he was going to hit him with his shovel." We all looked at Jamie, waiting for an answer. Finally I felt I could look up from my work without giving away the elation that was flowing through every muscle and nerve in my body. In the last month I have found my fair share of murders and made my contribution to the Gwajana by adding several stones to the tin box, but finding a gauzy was different. This diamond was mine, and mine alone. I wasn't sharing it with anyone. I was going to be rich. And now that I had found one, I knew I would find another, and another. "The army's coming," Jamie finally said. "The soldiers could be here by the end of the week." At the end of the day we all headed up to Gwajana Rock in a summer mood. Gemma's news about the possibility of the army coming to Marange made us realize how precarious the situation was at Banda Hill. I hated the fact that the Moy family was still living in the sheds, and that when I got home tonight, I would have to fetch water for a bath, lie down on a hard mattress, and breathe in the stale smell of old tobacco. But now with the gauzy I found, we wouldn't have to stay there much longer. All afternoon, I'd been daydreaming about the new Moy house we would live in. It would be bigger than Kandozi Farm, with a swimming pool and 2 garages. "I've been thinking," said Camber as we jumped from rock to rock on our way up to our camp. "If the army comes here, how are we going to cash in our stones?" Camber articulated what I had been worried about: turning my angel stone into cash. "If the army came, it might make that a lot more difficult." "That's going to be one big problem," said Arves. "The army is far worse than the police, and everyone knows we all work for Banda. If any of us are caught selling stones to any of the dealers around here, Banda will find out. You can never trust a dealer. They're like hungry hyenas, and Muta is full of them. We could sell them at night along the highway that passes Marange, Chapa suggested. I heard there were a lot of foreigners on the road coming to Muta, and they won't know or care who banned us. Yeah, I suppose we could try that, said Arves. No, you don't want to go to the highway. It's too dangerous. There are soldiers in the bush. I've seen what they did to people who were trying to come to Marange, I said, and then the idea popped into my head. If you're looking for a diamond dealer, I might know someone who can take us to one. Everyone stopped climbing and stared at me. You know someone who could help us sell our stones? Kamba asked. He's a French guy from the Congo. His name is Babuka. He brought us through the forest to Marange, and he works for a diamond dealer. A Farouk somebody. Abla. His name is Farouk Abla. Everyone around here calls him the Baron, said Jamie. And Babuka is his bodyguard. It's not a bad idea, Patson. My father hates a baron and won't do any business with him, so if you're careful, he'll never find out. But you had better know how to haggle. My father says the baron doesn't negotiate. Ho ha, Patson, you're full of surprises. Arves grinned at me as we made it to the top, and he handed me a bottle of water from our supplies. Didn't I tell you this guy was going to be great for the Gojna? But how are we going to find him? Asked Hamba, pulling out a packet of dried nuts and fruit, which he handed around. Oh, that's easy enough, said Arves. Everyone knows about the dealers that hang out at the dairy den in Muta, and they will know where to find the Baron. So how much are we going to ask him for our ngodas? Said Jamie, placing our tin of small industrial diamonds on a rock before us. I can't go. I might be recognized. We sat around the tin box, lifting up the individual stones, counting them, discussing how many carats each stone had, and their different colorations. Everyone had his own opinion as to how much our stash might be worth, but it was Kamba who surprised us all with his simple logic. Come on guys, of course we think they were worth thousands of users, but look at us. We're just kids, he said, raising his voice. Most of the dealers will simply take our stones and walk away. And what could we do about that? Go to the police? I don't think so. Patson should find this Babuka, and maybe together they could speak to the Baron, and we'll just have to be happy with however much money he brings back. No one could say anything after that. Kamba's words made me realize that finding a Gurazi was one thing, but getting someone to give you money for it, without stealing it from you, was another thing altogether. My Gurazi was still just a stone as long as I was unable to find someone to pay me money for it. Finding a diamond was hard enough, but selling it was harder, and more dangerous too. And if the soldiers come to Marange, who knows what will happen? You're going to have to get to the Baron as soon as possible, Chipper said as she wrapped up the tin in an old newspaper, stuffed it into a carrier bag filled with nuts and fruits, and handed it to me. If we're going to have any chance of cashing in on Yodas, you should go to Muta tomorrow, Patson. And cause I know Muta like I know every trench and hole in Bander Hill. I'll go with him, offered Arves. You can't trust those dairy den diamond dealers. They'll eat this chicken alive if I'm not there to protect him. Diamond Boy Chapter 13. The town of Muta lay at the foot of the Bumba Mountains, hours west from Marange. Arves and I had to hitch 3 lifts to get there. First, a maintenance truck that dropped us off at a rock called the Stone Four Girls, where 6 girls had been killed by lightning. Then a white guy Arves knew from his family AIDS clinic who dropped us at a taxi depot. And, finally, a taxi driver who agreed to take us the rest of the way free of charge. After Arves slipped him a small brown paper packet. We drove past Sakaba Township, past a roadside market of mounds of exhaust pipes and second-hand clothes, along the Ilapan lined Herbert Chaipo Avenue, and were dropped off opposite Meikle's department store at midday. Naked white mannequins stood behind the glass windows, frozen in different age. I peered into the shop at the rows of empty shelves. Election posters for the opposition party, the MDC Movement for Democratic Change, were stuck in the corner of the window. The people of Muta did not vote for President Mibe, which was probably why this shop was empty. "Come on," said Ars, dragging me away from the window. "It's time for me to eat." We ran across the busy street, dodging cars, until Ars spotted a woman selling roasted corn on the cob. Munching the corn, we headed down one of the alleys off the main road, and past shops with makeshift signs announcing Babylon Investments, Lucky Fields Enterprises, and GRISI Giants. "No, not here," Arf said as I tugged at his shirt. "Banda sells his stones to all of these guys. The dealers at Dairy Den will know where to find Babaka and the Baron." "Hey, Arf, stop holding on to the bag like that," I warned, throwing my cob into the gutter. "People will know you have something worth stealing." "I'm still hungry," he complained, tossing the bag more casually over his shoulder and heading for another street vendor. Saza and Relish. Sitting on the pavement with a pile of hot, plain white Saza was busy Acha between us. Ours, and I ate handful after handful, washing it all down with a can of Fanta grape. It was one of the best meals I'd ever had. I pulled my phone from my pocket. 4 messages from Sheena. "School's out. Don't want to talk about school. You there? Going crazy thinking about you. Hey mem, any friends? Do you have a girlfriend?" And then the text that took my breath away. "Do it mean anything to you?" And then, ignore that, never mind. I thought for a minute, put down my can, and texted back. Ars watched me carefully, wiping up the last of the gravy with a handful of Sada. "School is great. Lots of homework. Got no time for running. Yeah, good friends. No girlfriend. Yes, you mean a lot to me. Thanks. Girlfriend problems," stated Ars. "Nah, just an old friend from Bulawayo." He shook his head and looked at me with pity. "When you come to the fields, Patson, better you forget your old life. Nobody really understands what happens to you when you get here." He pointed a sticky finger at me. "It's like we're living 2 lives. The one on the fields, which is all about hard work, and the one in our imagination, which is all about the good life we think we're going to have. When you come to the fields, you enter the Garzi zone and become a zombie digger under the spell of Garosi." Ars. Aha! He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and looked up at me. "Stop talking crap. Okay. But you know I'm right." He chuckled. You said this Baba guy came from the Congo. Jamie said that he was a mercenary. You're sure we can trust him?" "Sometimes you got to trust somebody," I said, putting my phone away, pleased with the text I had sent to Sheena, and slipping Grace's tie from my pocket to my neck. "What's with the tie?" asked Ars, licking up the last of the acha Saza with his tongue. "Lucky charm. Let's go." He jumped up, full of energy, and headed off down the pavement. "Come on, Patson, hurry up. We don't want to get back to Marange in the dark." I hope that Babak will remember me. It was unlikely that Uncle James would have paid him anything for bringing us to the fields. He might not even want to see me, but I had kept these doubts to myself, and then, Seeing his tie hanging above Grace's mattress, I brought it along, sure that Babcock would remember Mademoiselle Gracie. "The diamond dealers of Dairy Den," announced Arves as we turned a corner and stared at shiny Mercedes-Benz's, Hyundais, and Bums that stood gleaming in the ice cream parlor parking lot. The men, dressed in the latest gangster style, gold chains, baseball caps, wife-beater vests, leaned against their cars talking into cell phones, with their beefy arms draped over the thin shoulders of long-legged women wearing bling from head to toe. Waitresses from Dairy Den bustled to and fro serving ice cream sundaes to the women, and burgers and beers to the men. Street kids washed cars that played hip-hop music. A crowd stood around a man holding an open black briefcase chanting auction speak. Across the road, a police van idled in the shade of a government building, its blue light whirling its sullen warning. "Watch and learn," said Arves, handing me the precious bag. "When I find out where Baba goes, we'll find Baron Farrakabla. I want you to follow me at a distance. If anything happens to me, you run, and I'll meet you at the naked mannequins. I know how to deal with these goat herders turned millionaires." "But Arves," I protested. "What if? It's going to be cool. I'm sure they'll know where the Baron hangs out." "Arves, I want to come with you." "Relax. Who's going to hurt a skinny kid with HIV? I get a lot of pity, and sometimes sympathy can be useful. I'll give you the thumbs up when it is safe, but it will be better if you keep your distance." Arves sprinted across the road, heading for the group of street kids washing a midnight blue Isuzu Trooper. After a brief exchange with the washer boys, he approached a man talking on two cell phones simultaneously. The radio chatter coming from the nearby police van made me nervous, and I realized how tightly I was holding the bag. Before we left the mine, the others had warned me about the dreaded plainclothes officers of the Central Intelligence Organization who roamed Utah searching for dealers. Diamond dealing was illegal. You had to have a permit, but nobody knew how to get one. If you were caught with stones, you were arrested and thrown into the back of a police van and never seen again. Remembering this, and my own advice to Arves, I slung the bag more casually over my shoulder. I tried to ignore the parked police van, but its slow-moving, sullen blue light made my skin prickle, and then I noticed the reflection in the shop window. A scruffy boy with legs and arms brushed with light grey powder stared silently back at me. The boy reminded me of those other boys standing on the side of a highway who had lifted their hands to form the shape of a diamond. Now I had become a militia, a smuggler of diamonds. Just like the boys I had seen in the long grass trying to sell me their orders. The words of the driver returned. "Signing their death warrants by sticking their necks out like that. They'll be dead in a week." I shivered and scanned the street for Arves. He had moved to a woman lounging across the hood of a car. He offered her something that she looked at with interest, before slipping it into her brassiere and handing him her ice cream cone. Then she pointed to a man with a nest of fat dreadlocks, lounging on a sofa in the back of a brand new Nissan pickup. Arves walked up to this open-air office, and hiked himself up onto the open tailgate, swinging his legs, and licking his ice cream as if he were on holiday. They talked for a while, and then Arves got up, tossed the man another small brown packet, and wandered away. He didn't look back at me, but I noticed him scratching his head with his thumb. That was our signal. I started moving, but then I noticed that Dreads had called one of his men, a man with baggy basketball shorts and dark glasses, and pointed at Arves strolling up the street. Dark Glasses nodded and headed off behind Arves. Why had Dredd sent a man to follow us? I crossed the road, keeping both dark glasses and Arves in my sight. Arves turned a corner. Dark glasses followed. I crossed the road and saw that Arves had stopped before a shop's entrance. He looked up at the building, glanced in my direction, scratched his head with his thumb, and then took off running through the traffic and disappeared down an alley, leaving his ice cream melting in the doorway. Dark glasses ran across the road and narrowly missed being run over by a speeding taxi. By the time he got across the street, it was too late. Arves had disappeared. Taking off his glasses, the man looked up and down the street and then, after a while, shrugged and strolled back toward the dairy den. I waited till he disappeared around the corner, scanned the street for any sign of Arves or shiny shoes and large watches. Did Arves want me to go into the shop alone? Suddenly, I felt that everyone looking at me knew I was carrying diamonds. I had to keep moving, so I crossed the road and paused at the puddle of melting ice cream. Above the door was a sign. FARUK Spectacles. Arves had found the Baron. The 14th. A bell jangled as I opened the door, and greeted a woman who sat behind a glass counter reading a newspaper. She looked up, pinning me with a glare. "No hawkers," she said. "And no car wash." "I've come to see Babuka," I answered. "And you are?" "Patton Moy. He helped my family get to marriage. He knows me. This is his tie." She looked more closely at me, and then picked up the phone, indicating that I should wait in the corner. I sat on the edge of the chair and looked out the window. There was no sign of Arves. My hands started to sweat. The woman dropped the phone back in its cradle and returned to her newspaper. For a spectacle shop, there were very few on display. The silence was hot. Sweat trickled down my back, and my leg was twitching up and down. I leaned hard on my knee, and at that moment Babuka stepped through a beaded curtain. He stared at me with a bemused expression. "Patton." I'd forgotten how ugly he was, but I had never been happier to see those scars and his broken nose. "Can we talk?" In the background, a police van hurtled down the road, its siren blaring. "Come." Babuka parted the beaded curtain and led me up a flight of stairs. We stopped on a small, dimly lit landing outside a heavy door. Our precious tin of Rogers wrapped in newspaper and stuffed among nuts. It seemed to be burning a hole in my bag. "Grace wanted to come with me," I said. "She says hello." He nodded. "But that's not why you came to see me." No. This was the moment I had to take the plunge. After all we went through to get to marriage, I felt I could trust Babuka. "I found some diamonds," I blurted. "I need your help to sell them." Babuka's black-hooded eyes bored into my own. "On Banda Hill." I nodded. "And your uncle knows that you are here?" I shook my head, suddenly embarrassed, as if I had been caught out in a lie. "Does your father know?" Again, I shook my head, unable to answer or even look at Babuka. "Patton, what you are doing is a very dangerous thing. Diamond dealing is not for children. Do you think that if you were caught, the police would treat you any differently from an adult?" "No, they will not. Now, before I can help you, you had better tell me everything." "Okay. And no lies." I could not refuse Babuka, nor could I lie to him, and so I told him how we lived in the tobacco fed behind Kundozi farm, how my father did not get the teaching job, and how he now worked on the mine for Uncle James. I told him how the wife had left my father. I told him about the Guajana Syndicate, how it operated secretly within the Banda Syndicate, how he swallowed the stones, and how we all needed money to help our families. We live in a tobacco shed, Babuka. I've got to do something to help my father. Once we have enough money, we will leave this place. But I don't know who to sell our notice to, and so I thought of you. Please, can you help me? Let me see your stones. I held out the tin box and handed it over. This was the moment Kamba had spoken about. What would I do if Babuka pocketed the tin box, picked me up, and threw me down the stairs and out onto the street? He opened the tin and studied the small stones. You Guijaners have a big appetite, he said, with a flicker of a smile. I will help you on one condition, that you behave like a man in there and speak the truth. Yes? I nodded. Then we go to meet the Baron. He rapped twice on the door behind him before he stepped into a carpeted room with shelves of books on every wall. Sitting at a desk in one corner, in a haze of smoke, a grey-bearded man, a pair of glasses on his head atop his small white cap, was studying a pile of stones, the now familiar loop stuck into his right eye. A cigarette burning in an ashtray curled a tail of smoke through the eerie light of a green lamp. Mr. Abdullah, we have a visitor. Babuka walked over to the desk and placed the open tin on the table. This is Monsieur Patson Moy. He would like to do some business with you. You know I don't do business with children, Babuka. The old man popped the loop from his eye and lowered his glasses to study me. I know this young man, said Babuka, moving to stand slightly behind Farrokh Abdullah. You can trust him? Him, so you say? Farrokh Abdullah picked up a pair of tweezers to move the tin box closer. Then he plugged the loop back into his right eye and deftly picked up stone after stone with the tweezers, studying them briefly and dropping them with a clink back into the box. A neat little collection of low-grade industrial diamonds, cloudy and flulled. Insignificant weight, with poor light. No, I would say not worth more than $100. He sniffed, closed the lid, and pushed the box toward me. Only $100. My heart sank. I glanced at Babuka, his ugly face gave away nothing. I might have 100 here, somewhere, Abdullah said, patting his pocket and producing a crisp Ben Franklin, which he laid next to the tin. I was about to take the money, but then I remembered the advice my father gave me when I was tormented by a bully at school. In circumstances where you find yourself powerless, words are always your best weapon, Patson, he had said, gently applying a discloth packed with ice to my blackened eye. You can always argue your way out of a corner by using the bright light of logic to defeat dull, dim thinking. If you get them listening to you, it is the first step to victory. Words are powerful, Patson. Put in the right order, they can move mountains. I didn't want to move a mountain. I only wanted the Baron to change his mind. I heard a rumor that the army is coming into town. I began cautiously. James Bander says they could be here by the end of the week. When the soldiers come, smuggling diamonds out of the fields will be a lot more difficult, a lot more dangerous too. I paused to allow this information to settle in the room. My leg wouldn't stop trembling, and I hoped that the Baron did not notice. I glanced up at Babuka to gauge his reaction. His face remained impassive, but I detected a glimmer of encouragement in his eyes. I was right beside Mr. Babuka when we saw what the soldiers do to men with illegal diamonds, I continued. They stripped them, beat them, and made them wish they'd never left home. Babuka knows, and he can surely tell you worse things than I can. The Baron raised his cigarette to his mouth, inhaled, and slowly blew out a trail of smoke, which curled above his head. He sat very still, listening to me. Then he shot a glance at Barbara, who nodded. I picked up the tin box, opened the lid, and took a deep breath before speaking again. Perhaps there will be a day when such a box of little diamonds will be worth more than $100. I will have to wait for that day, or perhaps find someone at Dairy Den who knows what James Bander is saying is true and has no problem doing business with children while they still can. Then I stood taller, as if I had made a decision, and said, "Thank you, Mr. Abdullah," and snapped the box shut. "I am very sorry to have wasted your time." "Wait a moment," said the Baron, raising his hand. "I don't know why young people are in such a hurry all the time." He sighed, sliding his pile of stones into his desk drawer. "Babaka, tell your friend to sit down," he ordered, offering me the stool beside his table. "And make us some tea. I will take some Darjeeling and make the same for young Patson. Perhaps he might like a biscuit too. I see we have a real businessman here who understands that with every transaction there is a process of negotiation. And that process works better when both sides take a little refreshment and the time to understand the needs of the other. Come sit, and show me those stones again." Perhaps I was too hasty. I sat at the table while the Baron looked again at each of the stones and provided a more detailed running commentary on their individual size, clarity, and value. Babaka, meanwhile, brought a tray with two delicate porcelain cups, a matching container filled with small white sugar cubes, and a teapot painted with small pink flowers. He placed the tray at the center of the table and swirled the teapot gently. Was this the same Babaka he knew? The one who carried a large knife? Yet he seemed perfectly at ease pouring tea into dainty cups. When he passed a cup to me, I noticed a slight twinkle in his dark eyes, though his face remained as impassive as ever. "Now I'm sure you have a figure in mind for these hard-earned stones," said the Baron, placing 3 lumps of sugar into his cup and stirring it slowly with what looked like a baby spoon. "What would that figure be?" 3,000, I said. The Baron sipped his tea. "Overestimating the worth of stones is a common occurrence in marriage. Those Dairy Den boys will laugh at your price. Take your stones," he said with a thin smile, "and then slit your throat. But here are Farrock's spectacles. I offer you tea and biscuits. As you can see, I am a reasonable and cultured man." I placed 2 cubes of sugar into my cup, stirred it slowly, and sipped the still bitter tea. "And your reasonable offer is 1,500. My stomach flipped. That was a fortune. I took another sip, trying to keep my hand from trembling. I glanced at Babaka, who stood directly behind the Baron. I thought I saw his eyebrows rise. 2,500, I countered. "Oh no, my boy, that is still too much for these stones. But I will concede that they are worth something. Perhaps this first transaction could lead us to a more permanent arrangement in the future." His eyes never left my face. He replaced his cup on the tray. Babaka refilled it from the rosebud-painted pot, and no one spoke until 3 more sugar cubes melted beneath his spoon. Only then did his eyelids blink when he said, "I think you need someone you can trust. Am I right?" "Go on," I said, sipping more of the tea, now enjoying its delicate sweet and sour taste. "I know Mugib's army will be here soon, and I have heard of their brutal ways of doing business. If you take all the stones you find to Babaka, you will not need to run on the street selling them to strangers or deal with those thugs at Dairy Den. There is no love lost between James Band and me," he said dismissively. "I give you my word that our business arrangement will remain a secret. What do you look for in a face when you need to trust someone?" The spark of sincerity in the eyes, the honest shape of a mouth? Or do you listen to the tone of voice and the impact the words have on your heart? All I knew about this grey-bearded man was that Uncle James Bander didn't like him and Babcock worked for him. He served the Baron tea as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I trusted Babcock with my life. It made sense, then, that if this man was his boss, I should trust him too. What the Baron had suggested was the perfect solution to our problem. There wasn't much more to think about, but, just to be sure, I glanced up at Babcock and caught another of his almost imperceptible nods. "Let's agree on 2,200, we said, placing my cup back on the tray. $2,000 is what I'm willing to pay for these stones, said Farakapola firmly. And this represents a down payment on our partnership. Do we have an agreement? Before I had a chance to answer, the phone on the table rang, followed by a commotion from the shop below. A woman screamed, and there was the sound of someone running up the flight of stairs. Babcock moved quickly to the door, his knife appearing in his hand. He swung the door open,